And then the little button goes red. And welcome, Michael. Over to you.
Well, hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I've got a bit of a sore throat, so if my voice starts to go at any point during the time, just give me a shout or just acknowledge that I'm a bit rubbish at talking. So the idea behind this, quite a few people I spoke to talked about the idea of communities not moving on, or the facilitators sort of having struggles to sort of carry on when they move on. So this is why this idea came about. This is me. So that's a nice picture I got taken the other day when I was at a new sort of joined as new type of company, currently at Knowledge Hub, which is part of my role anyway. And that's an online community platform, mainly for public sector people. And we're joined up as part of a new group called PlaceCube, which works in the same sort of area. It's around digital places for government. So that's sort of all coming about now. And so I've been working in the sort of community management area since about 2006. So just loads of ideas around that, and also before that around knowledge management. So knowledge management, community management seem to make sense to fit together nicely. There's a lot of crossovers between the two, and there's a lot of things we can learn from each other, each side of that sort of area of work. So what Nancy's going to do, we're going to start with a really, really simple little poll. So Nancy's going to hopefully press the button now to just find out a little bit about you guys, know who sort of people, who you are, a little bit about your experiences, so I've got an idea of the people who are online, so that maybe I can talk about certain things as I go along. So two questions are, do you look after an online community or a group of online communities? If you don't, do you actually participate in any of them? And that'd be really nice to find out. So hopefully they're starting to work now, because I can't see any results. Nancy, hopefully that's ticking along quite nicely, and you can let me know what's happening.
I can see it here, Michael, so you should be fine.
Great, that's all right then.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll give it a few more, 10 more seconds to vote. So do you look after an online community or a group? Maybe you look after one or many or none. And do you take part? No, never participated, yes, sometimes, or often. So I'll give you a couple more seconds to vote, and then I'll close the poll and I will share with you all the results. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Get your votes in now, and then I will share them. So hopefully you can see is that all on your screens?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. So a few people look after a group of communities. A lot of people look after one. Some don't really look after any. So most people participate in some as well. So that's really good to know that sort of got the right sort of people, hopefully, on the call. So hopefully that works really well. Okay. So next bit is I'm going to give you a little challenge. And the idea is to use the chat function, if you don't mind doing that. So I'm going to give you a little scenario. So I want you to pretend that you've been running this online community, probably for about a year or so. We've got about 150 members. During the week or during the month, you produce some sort of webinars like we're doing today. Maybe you do some active blogging, you upload fresh content, you promote the community in different ways, you speak to your key members to find out what things they need, what things they're looking to do next. And also you get the discussions going, keep the communications going. This is your scenario to start with. So imagine that's what you do for your community. I now want you to come up with 2 suggestions on how to kill this community. I want to make it inactive. So I'm going to give you 1 minute to do this. So hopefully the chat function's there. I want you to come up with 2 suggestions really quickly of how to make a community inactive. And my timer should now start working on this and start slowly moving around. I'm hoping that's now working. So I wonder what sort of things you can come up with on that. So that's about 15 seconds. I'll try and find if I can see what's going on in the chat. There we go.
I like the timer, Michael. That's cool.
Yeah, I found a little gadget on there. Now, you might have to tell me what sort of answers I come up with, Nancy, because I can't see it very well, mine.
Okay, no worries.
Hopefully people are answering the questions.
Yeah, no, we're getting some.
I can see it up now. It's up on the other part of my screen. That's it. That's why I couldn't see it.
I've added in a couple more myself.
Cool.
Lots.
This is where the co-facilitation comes in really handy with you, Nancy. So here we go.
Can I do the beats like the
I was trying to find the sound effect for that, but I couldn't find it. What sort of things have come up so far, Nancy, on that? About how you
okay, so let me just. So there's lots of answers here. So what to do to make it or to kill a community was your question. So we have, if you get placed into a different role, if you take away the facilitator, the irrelevant content or lack of new content, stop sharing or stop creating opportunities to engage, no new content, redundancies notice go out, don't listen to the members, leave it alone, remove online facility, don't post anything, don't welcome anyone, stop doing anything. Is that enough?
Yeah, that's perfect. Great.
Have no plan. Sorry, I'll stop. This is cool. It's still coming in, Michael. It's great. We can use this after.
Yeah, so I did this exercise with, I run an online facilitator community in the US. There's a group of people who run communities. And we did this exercise with them over an hour on an online forum. And we sort of narrowed it down into sort of 10 areas. So it's things like, people would be bombarding users, constantly like sending out emails one after the other. Sometimes people would say, deleting posts, things that have been interesting, being really rude, like that. So blocking content, making the structure of the community really complex so people could understand, especially new people coming into it. Some people say that the facilitators are sometimes subject matter experts and they might belittle some members on there and say, no, the questions you're asking are rubbish. Lots of different rules, excluding users, never respond. But the bit that I found really interesting was this idea of leaving. Quite a few of these ones, the communities that I'd looked into, the reason that they actually had failed, it wasn't because they hadn't updated the content, hadn't uploaded new content, it actually left. So the person who led the community had moved on and nothing had happened, which meant the community died really, really quickly. So that's where I wanted to start off with this, is that around the idea of looking at three key themes around like the handover side of it, knowledge retention, and the concept we've been playing around with around knowledge exchange. So I know for my experience working in different organisations, when someone's about to leave, normally you might get an exit interview. So normally the questions you get from the HR department is, why are you leaving? And they go, I found a better job. And that's about it, really. So that's like the end of the interview normally from that process. What occasionally you might get is some people actually spend some time trying to write some handover notes as part of that as well. And quite often people just leave quietly. They just move on. They're looking for, really excited about a new role. So they just to do what I need to do, and then they move on. There's no sort of transfer of knowledge in any aspect as they're moving forward. So when it comes to the actual handover process, I started looking into some examples of this, and this is from WikiHow. And if you want to do a real handover process, suggest discuss it with your manager, draw up an early outline, tie up loose ends, and I'll speak to your colleagues, make sure you get communicated, then write up a formal handover document. And this got me down the route of lessons learned approach as well, is that when it comes to writing up a formal handover document, the main problem with it loses context when you pass it on to somebody new. There's a really good story that Judy Pan, she's not couldn't make it today on the call, but she always tells me this great story about a recipe for cooking a curry. And one of the parts of the method is put your tomatoes outside. And she's sitting there going, why would I put my tomatoes outside? I'm in Reading, it's -2. I'm not going to stick my tomatoes outside. It's because it's only when she went back in the book and went, oh yeah, if you look at the context of this book, when it was written in a really hot, humid climate. So the context would make sense if you had that, but the way it was written down wasn't able to be passed on. And that's what seems to happen for a lot of handover notes, that someone will write it down, but when someone tries to read it and put it into practice, it's really difficult to understand and put it into practice. And also the role of the community manager, especially in my sort of sector, the public sector, it's normally an add-on to the job. It's normally the afterthought. So people, when they're moving on, if they are doing any sort of retention or passover of notes, handover, they're talking about the core job that they do, not the add-on bits that they always do as well, which is a big problem that a lot of communities fail because of that. So when it comes to knowledge retention, something that I think a lot of organisations need to do better at. I know that in the past when I worked for companies like the Improvement Development Agency, we did a lot of work around knowledge retention. We built that in with our HR team and our organisational development team. It made a huge difference to the way we got people on board and also the way people were moving on between different organisations. They really, really appreciate that time to spend reflecting back on what they've done and what worked and what didn't work. So they went on to the next role with a whole list of all the great things they've been involved in, rather than going into the organisation. What have you done for the last couple of years? And you're thinking, I can't remember. I did some stuff, but it was really, really useful on that. And we know that when staff move on, that knowledge, that experience, all those contacts they've built up, they're really, really important in certain roles. And what can happen, especially for new people coming on board, it takes a long while for them to build up that sort of core network of people they need to talk to and get the experiences up to date with them. And I reckon it's between 6 to 8 months before new recruits really contribute to the organisation. So that's a big gap. Now, you could be waiting 6 months, 18 months. Imagine someone's been given a role. Oh, you're now looking after a community. 6 months after someone's left and they've now got their feet under the table to understand what's happening, that community is completely dead by that point in time. So that's a bit about the community side. It's going to be so important. And if you want to read some more stuff on this, there's a lady called Colette Volhart. She's done a lot of stuff with some of the top Fortune 100 companies out there. And she talks about the idea. It's not only retention of the knowledge, but also recruitment costs, etc. So all these elements are really sort of difficult when it comes to replacing the person that's moved on. So like the idea of the social network inside the social capital, the learning curve for someone new coming into an organisation, all this can delay the support they've been given to the community because they're trying to understand how their day-to-day job goes without the community side of it as well. If you're looking at it from the idea of the employee life cycle, there's some really good work done by Gary Collette at the Kin Network, and the idea about making sure that you're looking at knowledge retention throughout the whole process, from the recruitment part to the onboarding side. So things around rapid onboarding, knowledge transfer at different stages of your life cycle, getting that put in, and also the knowledge retention part on it. And Gary tells a really great story about when he was at Marks and Spencer's, and he did a lot of work around knowledge retention. And when I did a lot of the interviews, one of the great stories was they found out one person was the only one that organised when they started doing all the seasonal products. So they're the person that said, this is when we need to start buying all the seasonal products. If that person hadn't told that story, that they were the only one triggering that, and had moved on, Marks and Spencer's may not exist anymore because they may have missed the opportunity to buy all the stock in, get all the things ready for the Christmas season. So that one little bit of knowledge that someone held wasn't part of their job description, but it was something that was really important to the organisation. And just lucky enough that that was captured at that particular moment. Otherwise, I don't think Marks and Spencer's may exist if that hadn't happened. There's other really good stories out there around like Sellafield about the work they've been doing, especially for their employees about to retire, about trying to transfer some of the knowledge around that. And I know Nancy's done some really good stuff around sort of knowledge profiles, actually having profiles for particular roles to understand what knowledge is needed, what's needed to be done out there as well. And the other key part is about identifying the people most at risk from leaving, or the knowledge that's most at risk from leaving as well, and trying to identify points around that. If you go back to things like from David Snowden as well, some really sort of simple little quotes that knowledge can be volunteered. The way we know things is not the way we report things. So quite often I've seen processes that people expect to be followed, but actually the real way to do it is completely different. And as you say, if we're thinking about the idea of handover notes, we can't write all that down. We can say a lot more than we can ever write down. So it's these sort of things that those handover notes I still think are a bit of a struggle to really sort of move things forward. So this gave us the idea of, when we're working at the IDA, around the idea of a knowledge exchange process. We wanted to move it away from just being handover notes to, if we can, knowledge holders. So actually getting the team involved and being the knowledge holders to pass on to new people coming in. And if possible, we did some direct transfer, which was really, really good. That, now imagine you get to actually meet the person that you're taking over the role with, and some of the little tips and hints that they're going to give you as part of that process that you wouldn't get from a handover note document. And if you want to, there's an old guidance document that we created, was at the IDA, and there's a couple of screenshots from it as well. So that's available in that download link as well. The key behind the knowledge exchange process that we've come up with was around looking at general information, looking at the people and skills, looking at the operational side, and also the lessons about what worked and what didn't work as part of that process. And these are more prompts to start it off, that get things going for it. I mean, one example was before I left the LGA was a lady called Liz we were working with. She spent quite a bit of time doing the handover notes, but we're working with her team and starting this process, and me as the facilitator behind it. There's things that Liz didn't even think about as part of the handover process that were really important to the team. And if they hadn't identified it at that point, Liz would have moved on and other people wouldn't have known how to do this in the future. But it's only because we started a process as a facilitator of this discussion, then brought the team in to ask questions, go more in depth, go in more detail, that things come out that Liz never even thought about at the time. She didn't realise that she was the only one doing this. She thought everyone was doing it. In reality, that wasn't the case. So, quick question for you guys. People who run in communities, do you have a community strategy or an action plan? Sorry, you haven't got to answer this one, you're quite safe. It's interesting that I watched Rich Milliton's webinar the other day, and the idea behind community strategy breakdown. He did a really quick poll about, do you have a community strategy? And the sort of results come from that are quite interesting. That 57% of people that will quickly poll it don't have an agreed community strategy. 19% of people have a strategy but don't actually use it. So if you think about it that way, about 76% of the people that were part of that poll have no plan, have no strategy, no action plan for the community. So if they moved on now or tomorrow and was passed on to someone else, they'd have no idea what was going on with that community, where it come from, what the description was, what the plans, what the ideas and activities have worked and hadn't worked, what things they were going to do in the future. So that's all missing, and that's quite important for any community, that if you are going to take over that responsibility, that you need to sort of be able to push it forward. And this is quite nicely feeds into sort of what we did around the idea of our knowledge retention part. We actually started building in prompts for the community aspect of it. So people who are running communities, we started going, here's some really simple questions that we can add into this, which you might be able to use. And again, it's only 12 really simple questions, and you've probably heard a lot of these before, but having these little prompts behind it are really quite useful for you to write things down, but also maybe work with your co-facilitator or other colleagues that you're working with to give you some ideas behind it. So really simple things like describe the purpose of the community. Quite often you've got a purpose, but there might be an overarching purpose that is hidden, or something that's more for the organisational side rather than for the members. So that's quite useful. You can just write that down in some way. The key objectives, so you're going to have objectives for the members, but again, there might be objectives for the organisation that have never been written down in a formal approach anywhere. What activities have worked on online and offline as well for your group? What do they like? So these are really simple little things. Membership criteria. So if you're taking over a new community, who's in, who's out? Knowing this information is really, really important, because otherwise you can lose the trust if you start accepting people into the group in the future that wouldn't have been accepted in the past. Top resources, where do people find the main content to keep that community going? So all these are really simple things that we all probably think straight away of doing this, but quite often these get missed as part of the process. What's the routine as well? How often, what things you do on a weekly, monthly basis, especially with a lot of communities, the idea of consistency is quite key, getting things going along. And I know I've had examples of this when people have moved on and they had the access to the social media accounts, so they knew what a password was, and trying to get that back can be quite difficult. So make sure you got all those details available in different ways. Sort of hot topics, again, quite useful things, because they always come back again. If you look at a lot of communities, give them a couple of years, you get the same sort of topics that come back over and over again, and there's just a little tweak here and there, but they're really useful to keep things going as well. What sort of types of content really, really work well is really useful as well, because if you put in lots of guides out there and they're getting lots of sort of contributions and downloads, etc., great, keep doing those ones. And otherwise, a lot of people put content on there that gets no interaction with, no one's actually interested in. And the sort of last two questions, things like what worked, what's not worked well, and also what things would you like to change about the community. So there's 12 really, really simple sort of prompts there for you to use if you are going to move on, or you're working with people who may move on at some point, and it just gives them something to sort of start the discussion with. You can work with them as well. And the one bit I found really useful is we normally do this using things like MindMeister or mind mapping tools, and I use this part of the knowledge retention process as well, but also for the community side, is start looking at your key contacts within your community. Who are the people you go to? Then start jotting down some little notes about them as well, about what things they're really interested in, what things they're really good at as part of the community. So if someone new comes into your role in the future, they've got an in. So rather than having to try and build up that relationship, you can jot down some little bits that they can say, oh, I know you're really interested in this, or that's something that you might find really, I've done something similar to as well. So you start building up that sort of relationship with them from day one, rather than it taking a little while for you to explain how that all works. So it's a really good little tool if you get a chance to use it. Just use a little mind map, work out who the key contacts are in your group. It's something you might want to do anyway for your own community. Just find out who everyone is, sort of try and allocate them into your go-to people, the people that always sort of come to you with different ideas, and try and find ways you can map that process into it to build up that nice sort of group of people that you can always go to when you need some support and help. So to summarise it, really, if you are going to, if someone is going to move on and you need some help, try, if you've got one day, you can do the handover chat. Keep those 12 really simple questions to use to try and get something out, try and pass it on. If you've got a lot more time, use the handover thing and go more in depth for sort of knowledge retention, and produce some notes that are actually going to be relevant for people to to go on to their role as well. And if it's longer, if you can sort of build in the knowledge retention process through the employee life cycle, that's probably the best approach. So you're identifying people who are most at risk, the sort of key skills that people have, and make sure that more than one person holds that knowledge within the organisation. That's some of the key things you can try and do, so that you're keeping the organisation's knowledge flowing throughout the organisation rather than you're losing it as one part of the process. So it was a bit of a whistle-stop sort of tour, and that's sort of quite nice and short, nice and simple sort of process that I wanted to go through. But is there any, last one, I'm sorry about this. Yeah, you think about it, if you are going to move on to a new role, you spent all that time and effort building your community, getting it working, making it successful. Don't you want it to continue once you've moved on? Because I'd like to be able to look back at a community like I've started and go, oh, that's still going really well. I must have done something there to really sort of shape that community to make it move forward. Because it's always nice to look back at the work you put into and the effort you put into it as well. So that's it for me, really. That's my quick sort of whistle-stop sort of tour on this. As I'd like to say thank you. Is there any sort of questions anyone would like to ask?
Yeah, I'll open it up. You're all on mute because obviously there's too many people to unmute you all at one go. But obviously do use the chat to ask any questions. I've just asked a question now, just saying what questions of those 12 in the handover chat are you likely to use, or perhaps you'd like to add in any other to the handover chat. For me, I've done this on lots of different levels, just to give you some examples. So when it's built into the life cycle and you have it's built into the induction, to the ways of working when you're in the role, and then in the succession planning, then it becomes not such an extra step, it becomes just business as usual. And that's where I've seen, the most value from. But obviously, we're all limited on different times. I can see from Michael's tools, just sitting down and having a chat with someone and going through those 12 questions could be really useful. If nothing else. For me, just bringing this to the front of your mind whilst you're in the role, you're probably doing reports or updates and things, but think what things would be useful to the next person, and then that becomes a folder or something in the day-to-day, and then you don't have to spend hours trying to find stuff. Could be really useful. And the stuff that isn't necessarily reported, like Michael said, the idiosyncrasies of the characters in or the things that happen in the community, or the people, their passions or pain points, or, the things that sets things a bit controversial, or, those sorts of things. They're the things that would be incredibly valuable. The example I give, I work with a recipe community with Thermomix, a kitchen appliance, and you start talking about baking and yeast, and you set a cat amongst the pigeons, because everyone's got a different opinion on how you should store it, look after it, talk to it, and all that sort of stuff. So it can be anything, but if those sorts of things that if you've recognized over the time that you've been managing that community, would be incredibly valuable as you pass it on to the next person. So I've just rambled then, but hopefully we've had some questions or some comments.
There's some good ones there so far.
So I'll leave you, Michael, to answer some of those. No,
I mean, well, Debbie's asked about sort of like enabling tech, so definitely something around that. Again, it depends on the type of group you're working with. So those are just the idea of prompts to start off with, and if you can get other people part of the team, they normally go into the more in-depth questions. So you could start it off with one question, but then, stuff I've done in the past, I might have a starting question, but I've got another 20 potential questions that will sort of work off of that. And the idea is to try and prompt people and also get the team to sort of go into that as well. So things around that and the tech side, you could definitely put stuff into that around that as well. Susan's said about the idea of video format. I've never used video format, but I had a really good example, from the Kin Network, from Erica Hurley, and she talked about there's one person there that was the only expert in the UK, and he wanted to go on sabbatical, and it's going to take him about 2 years to recruit for that role. So what he did, he got a head cam, and he filmed all the key things that he did, and he made a mind map video for the new person coming in, showing them how they do all the work. So it depends on the type of organisation thing you're working in. Video could be really, really important. You can do pictures, you can do whatever you want. So I know in the past I've done it with some people where the handover notes become something completely new. There was one example we had called the Big Scary Spreadsheet. And after we'd done some interviews with the team and also the person looking after that, we actually created 3 podcasts based on that. So some other people could then start to use that as well. And again, Debbie said about succession planning. Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I know not every organisation does succession planning. One of my friends works in advertising. He said he probably leaves a job every 18 months. So there's no real succession planning built into that. Jonathan's asked about the number 1 recommendation when this last minute critical subject matter expert is leaving. Oh, good. That's a good one. I think really it's going to be understanding the connections. For me, if you understand the connections, then you can go and ask them who they go to and why they go to these people at that particular moment for the different part of their work. Because if you can understand that, then normally they may hold the knowledge that could work for you as well. So understanding that can be.
And I'd like to add in there, and Jonathan, you'll know, if the relationships are critical. So wherever possible, even if the person has left the business, to trust the notes or documents that have been left in the business, they need to have spoken to them. So for me, even if people have moved to a different part of the world in this business, it's just to have that call and connection with people. All the material that's been left from the previous time, that it will be trusted, adopted, respected much more if there's a relationship between those 2 people. So even if there's no handover notes, no formal thing, just a connection between those 2 people is probably for me the number 1 recommendation for that. And to Susan's thing, we're using video all the time with the phones. You know, people are just doing really short little videos, just saying, this is how I do this has happened today, you know, more of that YouTube style. And definitely people, I think the rest of us overthink those sorts of things, and actually, you know, we can create some really good succinct messages about our communities in little sort of YouTube style little videos. Sorry, Michael, I didn't
that's
leave
okay.
you to answer some of the others.
No, Clive said about, especially around the technology side, about who to go to within the IT side. Again, that could be part of the discussion as part of it. I mean, that was just 12 quick, simple prompts. I mean, hopefully they'd know who to go to for some help and support as well. But if I haven't got that, that's definitely something to add in. Karen or Kay Rice said about
Kevin, yeah,
got a manager looking to going to leave, wealth of experience and knowledge, but says he has no more knowledge than anyone else. A good example I heard or I've seen, and we've tried it out before. We did an audience with, and got all their sort of colleagues to sort of it's like a celebratory sort of thing, and they did like the old TV series that used to be on ITV, and just got them in front of all their sort of their peers. And the peers just asked them questions about different things that happened. And that was a really, really great experience just doing that. Those stories that come out, and it was the things that they hadn't even thought about as part of this knowledge process. And so, as I say, a lot of people say, I don't, like everyone knows everything I know. But in reality, when you start asking them questions and you got their colleagues around them and they start digging deeper into some of these sort of little questions here and there, some of those come out really, they don't realise the knowledge that they have. Because as take like David Snowden saying, it's like the idea we only know what we need to know when we need to know it. So it's what those prompts can really work like different. So if you can do that at any point, sort of like building, just talking with other colleagues, some of the key colleagues that they got in there, that will make a big difference.
I was going to say, we've had some challenges when we've called it Ask the Expert, because like you say, Kevin, the person thinks they're not an expert and you're giving them that sort of branding, they're sort of then shy away. But we've had like, you know, Ask Us Anything or Audience With, or just changing the that. And if you can do a poll or something online first, you know, to get a census of the sort of questions, the person really relaxed, because actually they want to leave a legacy. That's why I said, even if they've left the business, just having a call afterwards, people are usually quite open to that. So yes, I would definitely create an opportunity for a group of people to ask some questions. If it has to be confirmed beforehand, great, but if it doesn't, you know, do it openly, like question time.
Yes, a coffee morning with their sort of like key sort of contacts, those sort of things, and just sit in and listen to that. And it's amazing what things people start talking about as part of that sort of discussion when they feel more relaxed. And just having those little prompts here and there can really sort of open up a discussion. And having someone with those skills to just ask the right question at the right time can make a huge difference to what people talk about as well. So there's some good stuff on that. So there's loads of stuff out there that you can look at as well. So Susan's asked about Alumni Networks. I haven't had much experience on this. I can tell you a good example from my wife. Actually, she used to work for Empower, and by accident they created an alumni program there where every Christmas and during the summer they invited all their ex-employees back to come back in and to just have dinner at lunchtime with them, and that created a really sort of like an alumni network by mistake. But everyone coming back to dinner, all the new staff come in and met, especially all the engineers, and they just got talking with all the people that had moved on. And what was happening, the alumni network got bigger and bigger and bigger every year. And so pretty much, I think about sort of 90% of the people that were part of that alumni network actually made it every year to just come back to have that lunch with their new sort of samples. Yeah, Kin alumni is quite a good sort of one. I mean, me and Nancy are both part of the Kin alumni sort of group that's been out there. Again, it's just people coming together to do that, and someone taking that sort of role behind it. I mean, a lot of alumni, you need someone to take that sort of time and care to do that as well. So if someone can spend that time to build that alumni network, that's really, really useful. But for me, if you can get things around food, that seems to be quite a unique way of getting people to come back to become part of an alumni. So if you can do that, that can be quite useful. So again, it's a lot of it's just trying different things out and seeing what works for your particular group of people. I mean, what works for them. We've talked about some people like the idea of technology and video clips. You've got some people that will hate that idea. So it's about finding out what makes them feel comfortable as part of that process. I don't know, Nancy, Darren, have you got any sort of other things that you come across?
Hi, Michael. So hi, everyone. My name's Darren Goff. I run a company called Island 23 that do some community consultancy, but in a different lifetime, I was community manager for a company called Money Saving Expert in the UK. It might mean more to some of you than others, but the relevance is that part of what we can do here also is to share knowledge with areas of the company that don't traditionally know what you do. So by starting this process early and working through, even if you know you're leaving, before I was leaving, we ran a series of learning lunches, and it just reminded me, Michael mentioned food there, but anywhere you're able to get people free sandwiches, you generally get a reasonable uptake. But actually it was great. We had people coming in from areas like legal. I was a community manager, from marketing. We really didn't know on a day-to-day basis what the community did or what my area particularly did. So what I was able to do is we were able to bring them together to ask questions. So actually when I left, not only did my team have documentation and experience of what I did, obviously, but actually that knowledge and information flowed better throughout the company. So the new person that took my job when I left not only had the support of their team, but they were able to go to other areas of the company to talk about how the community fitted in and what the value was. So sort of, think laterally as well as vertically in terms of the people you can share this information with. Because I think it helps the area that you work in, not just the role that you do and the great active work you do on a community or whatever you happen to do. So I hope that was slightly useful anyway.
Yeah, and say the idea like lunch is always sort of a great sort of thing. I mean, one of the interesting things I spoke to people, I kept in touch with people when I did move on to different roles and different jobs, is that when they did go into a new organisation, and that first question is, what have you been doing for the last few years? They had a list of about 20 key projects or things they've been working on to say, this is what I've been doing. And people were blown away by that. They were like, okay, so you've done all this stuff. Because normally when you go into an organisation, you go in because of the job role. So all the extra things they've been doing, they're like, I didn't know you could do that as well. Great. Oh, right. Okay. Would you like to get involved in this work as well? So it completely opened up the idea. And what some of the things we did again at the IDA, we did a lot of stuff with, we had a lot of consultants coming in on a regular basis. So we did a lot of stuff around the onboarding process as well. It was very similar to the retention side, just flipped on its head. So when people were coming in, we were trying to identify what skills and experience they had when they first come into the organisation that could be tapped into as well, rather than just relying purely on their job description, expecting them only to do these types of work as well. And that made a huge difference because that really works. Nancy, do you want to share your toolkit as well? I'm quite happy to do that. Go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, I just thought, we were talking about, and I made this reference earlier about building it into normal business flow. So obviously the knee-jerk reaction, like Jonathan says, is you get told tomorrow that someone critical is leaving the business and you need to do something like the things that Michael's talked about, handover notes, maybe a direct transfer, that sort of thing. But when I work with companies, then often I do a bit more research, and it's actually the whole flow through the life cycle that needs a bit of help. And actually, if they follow this, then there's less need of something so dramatic at the end. So working with the people that directly need this information, they identified these 10 steps that they wanted to help them through the knowledge transfer and retention process. So on day one, this was the joining stage, the yellow stage. They wanted a stakeholder map of everyone who they talk to, who's relevant for them and why. If possible, maybe their contacts, details and information. And then they wanted customer handover. They created some questions in a handover notes document of specific things they wanted to know about the customers they were looking after. So that was minimum requirement that they defined, that they then created for the future people. Then during their working life, then they wanted to keep organised, a consistent approach to record keeping, regular technical exchanges like the lunch bite, and then after action reviews, constantly reflecting on what's working and what's not. Then at the point of departure, they were much more open to do maybe this audience with, or have a buddy conversation or mentoring and all that sort of thing. And they created the sort of questions that they wanted answered during that stage. So that became just a constant evolution, you know, through all the people's co-developed and then supported and got the benefit from. So sorry, Michael, I just thought that might be useful to see it in that sense.
No, I mean, all this is great, because I mean, a few years ago we did a not like an online community discussion around the idea of leaving but not lost. And I know, like people like John Murphy, who I think is one of the government departments, talking about when the whole organisation moved from like the London offices to the Birmingham offices, they had to try and do a whole range of knowledge retention because so many people didn't want to move. So trying to build that process in was, you know, trying to work out identify who's most at risk from leaving and the knowledge they had. I know like Sellafield talked about that idea as well, that trying to identify who is most at risk is quite important if you're looking at it from the holistic point of view for the whole organisation. Who are the people that, you know, you can't do without? And if you do like things around social network analysis as well, that, you know, who are the key people that spread that knowledge around as well. So there's loads of things you can do on that as well. And Nancy's asked me to share the last sort of 12 questions again. So.
Yeah, I just thought, is there any other questions from anyone else today? I appreciate we're more familiar maybe with the content that Michael shared, so I've just asked to share the 12 questions again, but we will share you the slides afterwards, and obviously keep the conversations going in the group. But do use this time before we finish if you've got any other questions. This is Michael's model for key things for community managers to share and transfer that knowledge retention.
So if you want to talk about, if there's more stuff around the knowledge retention side, there's definitely like Nancy's and stuff. I've done a little bit on it. There's people out there that are experts in this area, which got some really great sort of tools and techniques and ways of working that you can use. This is very much built on the idea of that the communities get left out. They do the stuff about your job role, but the community bit is your add-on role that no one really touches upon. So these are the 12 sort of questions. So we'll put this out later on. I'll get the slides shared out as well for Nancy to do that. But again, the idea is add to them. This is a starting point. If you, as people mentioned about the technology side, those parts, add this as additional questions that if you need to use them, just build it up as you go along. These are just the starting points for the discussion to sort of move forward and how we do things. So those are the 12. Okay.
There's a couple more comments before we close. So Susan's saying that knowledge share versus capture at the end of the day should be focused more on knowledge share than the capture. Michael, do you take that?
Yeah, just find a question. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's
well,
all right.
I mean, I've got an opinion on that, but it's biased.
Yeah, well, so the knowledge share and knowledge capture, again, you can capture up to some points of it, but it's that discussion that gives you the insight into how it can actually be really used. So having that maybe in combination with each other, so having the processy bits you can write down up to a point, but those discussions are things you can't really write down are quite key. And if it just passed on to another colleague, they can then pass it on to the new person coming in. So that could be some things that you could do as part of that as well. That's what we got here. Attention to
and then Adrian, I'll answer this one then, and then we'll come. Do ask any other questions. is handling people that are less keen before they leave. Honestly, I've got people that are being made redundant, that are very cross about that decision.
Yeah, that's the awkward one, that is.
There's when people call me up. But honestly, on a common ground, you know, particularly anyone that's had any length with any company, they probably care about the work that they've done, and they would like their legacy to continue afterwards. You know, it's a bit painful, a bit prickly at first, but once you can find what they're most proud of, or what they're really, you know, something that's worked really well, and they start talking to you about those experiences, then you can find something. I think getting them to write it down before they leave is hard, and I wouldn't necessarily, but getting the people that are going to carry on the flag for them, sitting them down and facilitating that conversation in that sort of audience thing, then that people, you know, then those people are more open to it. Honestly, I've had arms folded going, I'd never do that, to sort of like, no, I can't shut them up, you know, they're talking for England. So,
actually, Clive's put one on there, and I remember going to an event with Clive at Lloyd's, and there was a lady from NASA there, and they had an expert in the field saying, oh, he's going to go become a consultant and come back again. And they went, well, you need to try and like do some knowledge retention so people know about you when you left. And he's going, no, I'm not going to do that. He goes, I'll be back in 18 months. He tried to come back 18 months later. No one knew who he was because he hadn't left a legacy and couldn't get a job back there. And they were going, well, if you had left a legacy, people know who you are. People were going, oh, they've really shared their knowledge, experience, so we can bring them back because we know who they are. But because they hadn't done that, they didn't get a job back again. I thought that was quite a sort of an interesting way to do that.
Yeah. Just
so the consequences of not sharing in some occasions as well.
Right. There's a couple more questions, and then we should close. But do carry on asking the questions in the group. So Robert's asking, should there be a formal process for community groups, such as managing additional, as often the handover is forgotten? That's for you, I think, Michael.
Yeah, again, this is something I want to do. I've been trying to do this in an organisation was okay because there's more of us, but say only even 3 people running a whole platform, 150,000 people, we can't always do everything for everyone. So the idea is to try and build this in as part of a process to allow people to try and do it themselves. So that's the idea of the prompts behind these, that we can't do it for you, but we can give you some help and support on the ideas of things you could do.
Just make it simple and easy for people.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't think about this stuff until the last minute, or they don't even bother about it. It's like, I'm moving on to the next role. As you said, some people just want to move on and and leave everything else behind because they found something new to do. So
cool, right. I think unless there's anything pressing for anybody, I think we'll draw the webinar to a close. Thank you, everybody who's joined this morning, particularly Michael for your great presentation. Thank you, and Darren for supporting us today.
Thanks for the questions.
Always appreciate your feedback and questions. We're trying to work out the dynamics between content versus discussion, and I think today's been a good balance. But yeah, really welcome your feedback, and yeah, don't leave it there. Keep the discussions going and give us ideas or topics of things to carry on, and we'll confirm the next webinars with you shortly. So I will end the poll there and share the results. Yeah, it sounds like it's been helpful for people. That's really good to know. So thank you again to everyone who's joined, and we'll share with you the slides and the recording later today, and we'll hopefully run another webinar next month. So we look forward to seeing and hearing from you then.
That's great. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Darren. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.